So there is absolutely nothing about the benefits of marriage at all in the guidance. There's stuff about healthy relationships and stable relationships, but nowhere the marriage and stable relationships get connected to each other.
Dr. Julie Maxwell, so good to talk to you again. Friend of Coalition for Marriage, not only friend, but of late, one of our new board members. So welcome in that capacity too. It's a real joy to have you. We're talking today about an article that you were commented in. I think it was Evangelicals Now. And let's be very clear that our supporters, tens of thousands of them, come from all faiths and none. A lot of them, most of them maybe, will be Christians. But you were quoted in an article which was looking at the new RSHE guidelines as published by the government back in July, I think it was. And I just wanted to cover some of those things with you now. First of all, I think they replaced the previous government's guidelines from 2019. Take a minute, if you wouldn't mind, and just tell us from your point of view what you thought was good and what you think needs looking at again.
These guidance, like you say, replaces the 2019 guidance. There was some draft guidance which was produced, which wasn't perfect by any means, but had a number of positive things which have not come out in the final guidance. But given that we had a change of government in the meantime, it's not surprising that they were changed. So I think for me, the biggest positive in the new guidance is the emphasis on parents being actively engaged and particularly in parents being allowed, not only allowed, but schools must allow parents to view material. So there have been a number of situations where parents had tried to view RSHE material and the schools had said they couldn't because the companies that produced them had copyright and things like that. So that has been very clearly stipulated that schools must allow parents to see material. It's probably the biggest positive in the new guidance that is important. But obviously the thing that we need to make sure is that parents ask to see materials because they won't automatically be shown material. And so I think parents need to make sure that they engage with the schools, that they ask what's going to be taught and ask sort of good questions about it. So I think that's the biggest positive.
And so Claire Page would say, and she argued for this for a long time, no secret lessons, etc. But one of the criticisms of it's great to have that finally in place that we can see what our kids are being taught. But as you say, you've got to go and proactively ask to see them. And it's yet to be decided in terms of how schools will respond. If that takes the form of, well, you're going to have to come in and we're going to have to let you look at them in a room one day and you can't have copies of them. I think the guidance says that more is required, but we'll have to see what happens in practice. But of course, that's very separate. Looking at the teaching materials is kind of separate to what's actually taught in lessons, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And just because you've seen what the material is, that doesn't actually tell you what the teacher's going to be talking about in the lesson, which could be very different. So I think that's helpful in that obviously there has been some very concerning material being used, so that will be addressed, so that if a parent sees that something sort of pictures about gender identity or resources that glamorize LGBT lifestyles, those kind of resources, parents will be aware of that. But the resource might look relatively bland, but actually what is said, it might be different. And I think, if I look through, for example, a school's RSHE policy or some of their resources, I can pick up the bits which, might lead the teacher then, if the teacher is so minded, to go down avenues that perhaps parents wouldn't want. But the parents might not realise what that might be.
Yeah, and the other kind of nuance, before we get on to some other kind of criticisms, if you like, the other nuance is that, of course, there's relationships education and relationships and sex education. And one you can opt out of, but the other one you can't. And the problem is, of course, it's up to the school to decide which bit is covered in which area.
Yeah, and so parents can still opt their children out of sex education, but actually nowhere does it really say what is sex education. So reproduction comes in the science curriculum, and relationships education is compulsory. So I'm not really at all sure what would be considered sex education that would be something parents would be able to take their children out of, and it really is not clear. So it's a sort of it's good in that it does give the parents that kind of way of coming into the school and saying, I'm not happy with this. But I think the other thing actually on that is that when you look at the guidance, when it talks about parents being able to opt their children out, it then sort of says to the school that they're supposed to persuade the parents of the value of sex education and how necessary it is. And so that feels a bit kind of undermining of parents, really.
And of course, if you're in Wales, it doesn't matter anyway, because the opt-out has been removed for everything. You've just got to put up with it.
Yep.
And the other thing, of course, which has been changed is that the minimum age has been taken away. So there's now no minimum age at which children can be taught all sorts of things. Now, the idea is that, well, let's leave schools to decide. But, if you've got a situation with an activist head or an activist teachers who end up teaching things which are clearly, and we've had examples of this before, age inappropriate, there's no now guidance limit to stop them. The minimum age has been removed entirely.
Yeah, and so that was one of the things that was positive or relatively positive in the draft guidance, although many of us felt that the age limits were still, far too low. Or high, whichever way you look at it. But actually that's been completely removed now, so that there's no guidance on when things might be taught, which is particularly concerning given the breadth of things that are now covered in our SHE. So sexual violence, suicide, mental health, all of those kind of things, which you need to be really careful about not introducing them too early. And and while we would love to trust teachers, it would be lovely to think we could trust them completely. What we do know is that there have been so many instances of inappropriate things being taught, and children are at very different very different stages as well.
And you're right. So there's expanded LGBT content. You did say, I think in the piece that I read, that the gender-related guidance is quite muddling. So first of all, comment on those two bits, expanded LGBT content. It's now assumed that same-sex relationships are equal to heterosexual relationships, and we know that that's empirically not true in many different ways. But comment on those things.
Yeah, so there's a whole sort of section on LGBT content, and it says that so primary schools are strongly encouraged to teach about all types of families. So it's not must, so they don't have to, but they are strongly encouraged. And so it's this kind of all types of families being equally valid, and actually, and in the midst of doing that, often they're same-sex families or single-parent families are being sort of promoted in a way that married couples aren't being promoted.
Even though that promoting marriage is in the legislation, not the guidance.
Yeah,
actually, you find
absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And the gender identity issue. So in the draft guidance, it had said that you mustn't teach about gender identity. But now it says, I'll read what it actually says. It says they should not teach as fact that all people have a gender identity. So they can teach it, and they can teach about it, but they mustn't teach it as fact. And they also are supposed to avoid any suggestion that social transition is a simple solution. So not avoid any suggestion that it's a solution, but that it's a simple solution. So I think that really muddies things and allows for, yes, it allows for schools to not teach it, but it also very much allows for schools to teach it. So I think it's good for schools or parents that don't want some of this stuff taught, because schools don't have to. But for activist teachers, then they've got free reign really to teach,
and that's the thing,
as they wish.
Yeah. And then they've introduced this new element, this new negativity over boys and masculinity. Tell us something about that.
Yeah, so there's just sort of peppered throughout it. There's a lot of talk about sort of misogyny and sexual violence, of which, of course, the majority of that is perpetrated by males, and they're sort of seem to be sort of going to pains to kind of say, well, we mustn't, tar all male men with the sort of negative ideas. However, it is there, and what is not there is any sort of positive teaching about being a man, being a woman, what masculinity, what femininity should be like. So it's sort of it's just a sort of negative spin all the time. So sort of trying to make the point, but actually really making it worse. Because if you teach particularly young children, these kind of ideas, that it's in their head then. And rather than just teaching that it's good to be a woman, it's good to be a girl, it's good to be a man, it's good to be male, that's not in there at all, which is really sad.
And very much ignoring parents. I was reading the latest Children's Commissioner's report survey on schools today, and very much the emphasis is to really the state to be the parent. To wrap in, to increase counselling, to increase all sorts of things, breakfast clubs first thing in the morning, really to take over the life of your child while it's awake, and really to airbrush almost the parent out of the picture. What can we do then as parents, as concerned parents who want to influence the raising of our children, and maybe we don't feel able to teach them out of school ourselves and can't afford a private school? What do we do?
I mean, I think the biggest thing to do is to engage with the school as much as you can. I mean, I think, and in a positive way, not just always being the parent who complains about things, but engaging positively, being interested. Volunteer if you've got the time. Volunteer in the school. Go and read. Go and do just be in the school, or be a school governor. Obviously, not every parent has got the is able to do that, but engage as much as you can, and be that parent who praises the good things as well as picking up on the things you're not so sure about, and asking questions. So asking questions doesn't have to be negative, it's just being interested, and talk to your children. Obviously some children talk more than others. If your child will tell you what they've been learning, then do that, and so engage with the topics that they're doing at school and talk about them at home as well. So not necessarily saying, what did you learn at school today, but talk about the general topic. And so you might get something out of them about what they've been learning.
Very good advice. And actually all the evidence says that what really matters for children in school is stability at home, and the greatest predictor of stability at home is marriage.
Yeah.
And so, those, and again, for some reason, the school system will not look at or acknowledge anything to do with that. We'll look at everything else and provide loads of resources in school, but won't look at the thing which seems to make the biggest difference of all.
Just looking at the guidance again this morning, and I noticed that marriage is only mentioned 13 times in the guidance, of which 6 of those references are related to forced marriage. So, and the other references are basically all about the legality of marriage. So there is absolutely nothing about the benefits of marriage at all in the guidance. There's stuff about healthy relationships and stable relationships, but nowhere the marriage and stable relationships get connected to each other.
Which is really bizarre, considering it's the starkest piece of evidence of all, and all the social science will back that up. But there we are. It shows the importance of people like you, just going around the country as you do, spreading the word and encouraging people to get involved with their school, get involved with their children, to make sure their own marriages are working well, and to just not leave it to the state.
Definitely.
Yeah. Julie Maxwell, thank you so much for your time.
Lovely. Bye.